Brad Blash, how are you?
I am doing well, Yuval.
So people that don't know you, you are entrepreneur, real estate developer, you have amazing company and you have amazing people that follow you. And I'm a young entrepreneur who learn from you a lot and I just start to learn from you and I appreciate that you are in the show.
It's good to be here.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's nice to see young entrepreneurial people, looking to engage positively with the rest of the world, and I'm happy to help however I can.
that's amazing. So people that don't know you, who is Brad Blash?
I am a hustler, I guess you'd say. At the end of the day, I wasn't the top of my class in school. I really kind of blossomed when I hit the real world. So I always, maybe didn't fit in relative to the authority figures relative to school, and I'm an independent person, obviously. So I ended up getting a job by working hard and being interested in something. There's a concept of overlap in life, right? What you're good at, what your passion is, and what you can succeed at. Is there a place where there's an overlap? And I found that I was more interested in kind of real life problems and solving them in the business world, and I was able to work myself into a position, as a temp at a large organization, and ended up becoming a managing director of a major fund over 15 years of hard work, and then took that from there into a private company that we started with New York Life Investment Management, who liked our niche investment strategy. And we were blessed to, sometimes in life you meet people and you have to listen to the universe
Yeah.
until what it's telling you. Sometimes you might meet an opportunity and it's not always the right time to take advantage of it, but we were lucky and good, and we're able to meet the right people at the right time, and that led to us starting Crossbeam with Big Blue as our partner, which is maybe the best potential business starting partner you could have. A 150-year-old company with a AAA credit rating, and one of the icons of U.S. financial system, and we were able to succeed within the corporate environment. That's what I learned over time. So as a young man, I was, very interested and very driven to do work and, make my bosses happy and make their life easier. But at the end of the day, we were looking for an opportunity to take what we had. We became, and myself and my compatriots became very good at figuring out how to operate within the corporate structure to deliver for clients outside the company. And so that's what I was able to succeed at when I first started as a hustler. I didn't have the Ivy League MBA
Yeah.
like the rest of the guys, but I worked harder and I, tried to think more than the rest. And, I ended up being able to serve a lot of my customers, Fannie Mae investment capital. And then that led to me having the ability to, bring other investment capital to the table.
Before we're gonna dive into the podcast, I wonder that people that's watching us will understand like how big your projects are. Like if now we speak about the value of all the projects that you ever build,
Yeah.
how much
Um,
we speaking about?
uh, Probably $2.5 billion. So
Wow.
yeah, and it's one deal at a time, right? So I, look back, I've been at this for a long time, since 1990. So it's been a long road, and what's nice about our business is that I'm passionate about real estate, about what's around it, where should it be priced, what could it be, vision, and then trying to take that and reverse engineer a financial pro forma and a investment thesis that makes sense to people.
Yeah.
And that is what really is the essence of kind of what we do and what excites me. And so I would love doing what I do, whether I got paid for it or not, but don't tell the investor that.
How you find the balls to start a company and go on huge project like that?
Yeah, I didn't answer the question before, but I think, 2.3 billion is the total value. We had an interesting conversation. So when I was managing the formation of Crossbeam at night, so working for Fannie Mae as a managing director of a fund during the day, and between the hours of 9 and 11, I worked with the managing director of New York Life trying to manage the spin out so he could get a bonus that year. That was his goal. And what we figured out at the end of the day was we were able to find a niche strategy that was compelling to people. And, that allowed us to grow a company over time. But, we started off with one project at a time like everyone else, and you just have to get the first one done.
Yeah. What do you remember from your first project?
So my first kind of big project where you make your bones.
Yeah.
So it was a project called the Ellington Apartments, and it was at 13th and U Street in Washington, D.C. And if you go back in time in your time-lapse video, you'll get to Washington, D.C. circa 1995, and they had just finished putting in new metro stops and had torn up the streets, and a lot of neighborhoods that now had new metro stops were in edge neighborhoods, as right on the edge of where people felt safe, or what I would say young women walking home at night would feel safe. But it was a lot of gentrification was happening, and the metro system was a massive change in the landscape of the district. So a lot of U.S. cities had a bad reputation in the 90s. New York was crime city, but they helped by real estate development, really helped turn a lot of these cities around. So in New York City, they came up with a tax abatement. If you would invest in a building, all the money that you put into a building after you bought it would have, would not be taxed. So, if you built a building, you would have 10-year tax abatement. And so that incented people to put money into the system. And the metro system did the same. It delivered people to your door. And if you had the vision to go 4 blocks where everyone thought it was safe because there's public transportation there and massive infrastructure investment, and that helped, lead to whole city blocks and, tens of city blocks being redeveloped with, we at Fannie Mae were some of the first capital in, but then the rest of the opportunity funds and major institutions would come in afterwards, and Lululemon and everyone else. And so it's really was a unique opportunity for us to start to understand what I call capital gains on neighborhood. When is it the right time to invest in a neighborhood because 2 years from now it's going to be the hottest neighborhood? And when is that neighborhood that you think is going to be hot going to be not hot for 10 years and you lost your money? And so it was nice to learn on Fannie Mae's dime, a lot of those lessons.
That's amazing. Like you start everything from zero and like just without
I
work.
started in a closet. So
Yeah.
I started as a temp. I chased a girl to DC, and I knew that I liked finance more than other stuff. So I wasn't willing, and I was just trying to get a temp job in a few of the finance places in town. In Washington, D.C., if you're not familiar, it's very hard as a regular individual to understand the economy there
Yeah.
because it's not like the rest of the economies in the world. It's all consultants and service providers and people and PACs and nothing to do with factories or the general economy. But Fannie Mae happened to be kind of at a point where government and finance meet, and I was able to get a temp job. I started in a supply closet where they put a little desk for me, and because I was willing to work harder than others, I would be there till 7 or 8 or 9 at 10 o'clock at night delivering memos to the chairman's office, etc. And people got to know me. And over 15 years, that really helped me in terms of my career by virtue of just working hard, keeping your head down, showing up when people and going the extra mile. And I got, increasing responsibility little by little, corporate environments, and especially in entrepreneurial, environments like today, where when I grew up, it was get a job
Yeah.
and do what the man, wants you to do, and you'll succeed and pay off your mortgage and be happy, and you can get a pension or a retirement. I wasn't really that excited about, the soulless 15, 20-year slog to get to retirement. And so I wanted to do something different. So it was really how to make the corporate environment, exciting. I knew I had challenges, but if I could deliver results to my external clients, then that gave me, some, agency in my industry. And so at first, the development community that I was partnering with to be the investor, they would come to us with deals, and I would fly to, say, Chicago, and our local team would show me 10 sites they're looking at with different developers, and we'd pick one, and then I'd go to LA and we'd do the same. And so I got the real opportunity to see America's greatest cities at one of the best expansion times that happened kind of over the early 2000s, where the economy was booming, downtowns were, changing shape, and it was nice to be a part of, kind of a regenerative finance boom that helped that happen. And that's almost reversing now, where a lot of the cities are having, it's everything's cyclical, and
Yeah.
it's, cities were the greatest thing. And now, after COVID, suburban flight, it's changed a bit. And some cities, especially in the office market now, it's a seminal moment in U.S. real estate, in my opinion, as it relates to kind of work life and the fact that most institutions, majority of their capital previously had been invested in office. And so if you look at the investable universe in the world of institutions, you can invest in office and retail, hotel, hospitality, storage and logistics, and multifamily. And one of the biggest eaters of, or allocations of, from all those institutions' capital, office, is a real question mark right now. And it's that, combined with a Fed that has essentially beaten the snot out of every real estate person for the last 2 years. So it's a very dour time in the market. But that helps me through learned patterns of experience and pattern recognition to understand when things are the worst is when you should be looking for opportunity.
Yeah.
And those are the lessons that you just learn. I wish I had, when things make fundamental sense at a point when no one else can see it, that's your advantage.
Yeah.
And you have to be right, because there's a lot at stake, but you have to trust your instincts. And no matter how much analysis, I've gone both ways in this world of investment, and specifically real estate. I was the analyst, doing, extremely complicated models in the weeds. And I've been, a member of the investment committee looking just at it from a 10,000-foot view perspective. And at the end of the day, the ultimate decisions are somewhere between the two. It has to make economic sense. The numbers have to hang together. But really what you're doing is trying to understand a fundamental factor that others don't. And that's why we really have specialized in a very specific area of real estate where we don't have the same competition. And we can take advantage of our reputation in places. So, for example, we buy apartments and rehabilitate them. It's a great business because the U.S. housing system, both between taxes and finance. So if you are in real estate, the most important things you need to understand is be careful with leverage, right? Because it can hurt. It doubled. It is a multiplier effect. If you made the right decision, if you have high leverage, it doubles it. If you make the wrong decision, if you have high leverage, you're going to have twice the loss.
Yeah.
So it's a volatility increaser in terms of the sinusoidal wave. And so within the context of real estate, there's many different inputs, which is what I'm so excited about. I love getting on the ground and, digging in and understanding. But at the end of the day, you have to have an instinct and a niche strategy around that instinct. And what's nice for us is that a lot of people don't see the niche that we're in. So we're able to get more deals because we're more convicted, because we've been doing this for a long time, where others may have used a more generic strategy and are looking for other ways to get stuff done. But, in the U.S., as it relates to cycles right now, I would say pay attention.
Yeah.
Right now is when to pay attention. If you are interested in deploying capital into the U.S. markets and you need my advice is find a sophisticated partner who is local and has a skin in the game and a reputation at stake. But there's excellent opportunities to partner with people to, bring capital to the U.S. and deploy it into strategies. And the reason that we find our little niche so compelling is, as we talked about all the different food groups in commercial real estate that you could invest in, we're the only one that has lenders that are supported by the U.S. government that have to make an orderly market at all times. Middle of the great financial crisis, you could still get a loan.
Well,
It wasn't at the best rate, and it may not have been, maybe you got 75% of the purchase price before, now you got 50, and instead of it being at 3%, it was at 7, but you could still get a loan. So that means that this asset class can transact at any time. And the fluctuation as it relates to the value of the asset is diminished significantly in terms of volatility. So in the office or the other food groups, when the times are great, people overpay and they're able to get max leverage.
yeah.
And then when the market goes south, like in office, you can't get a loan. It's not like in multifamily where I can get a really high attractive loan or I can get a mediumly attractive loan, but I can always get a loan.
Yeah.
What is the price of an asset if you're going to buy a condo here in Boulder and, it's for sale and it's not, it's in a tough situation in terms of the market like today. And if you were to look to sell it and you could sell it and you could give someone a loan for 60% of the purchase price and they only had to come up with the cash for the remainder, you might have 10 buyers.
Yeah.
If the answer was you can only write me a check for the entire amount, you might have 0 buyers. And that's the difference relative to the financial support in terms of our industry in the US. And then apply to that some, experience of niche strategies. So what we focus on is the middle market, which is messy. So in the US, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, country club partnerships, doctors got together. They might buy or build 75 units because it was cheap. And the amount of capital that it required back then is not like it is today. That has gone way up. So there are a number of unsophisticated partnerships that own assets that might be worth $20, $30 million today. And those assets no one's reinvested in them. These guys, the doctors invest. What do they want? Distributions. What do they don't want? Capital calls. They don't want to put more money into the deal. They just want more and more passive income. And it's understandable why they like it because US tax law, besides oil and gas, I think multifamily or real estate in general may have the best tax treatment. So
Nice.
in the following way. So let's say I buy an apartment building and it's $100 million I pay for it to make life easy. I can depreciate that $100 million over 2 schedules at the same time, if that makes sense. So I can take $20 million of the asset value and put it into accelerated depreciation, which means take $20 million divided by 7, and that is an offset to any income I get from the property. Then the $80 million, it's 100. I bought for $100 million. I can depreciate on a 27-year basis. So 1/27 plus 1/7 of the other amount adds up essentially to the first 10 years of no tax on the income because of depreciation offsets it. And for patient investors, that's, that cash flow after tax, depending on your situation, consult with your expert, but that's a big deal, and wealthy families in the US have figured out that owning, apartments because they have a finance source at all times and being able to write off most of the income in the beginning years. And as they hold it, they could write off, the entire purchase price over the hold period. And then instead of selling and having a tax event, they can do one of 2 things. They can 1031 those dollars and keep it, into another asset that starts at the same depreciation again.
Yeah.
Or if, what we've seen really smart families do is build or buy with 50% leverage, a safe amount of leverage, and then operate the property. And under US tax law, if my income in the multifamily business goes from 1 million to 2 million, that every dollar of revenue, net operating income, as we call it, people will pay you between 17 and 23 times that amount. So we're not talking about venture. I deal a lot with families and they talk a different language, and I'm trying to kind of get through to them like, look, I don't think you understand. This is a better deal
Yeah.
in the sense that where are multiples now in venture for tech? It's like maybe 8 if you're, the 20s
Yeah.
or 15s or 20s aren't there. And that's great. And sometimes you get, massive multiples. And I understand it's a, one unicorn out of 100 kind of bet. But, what's interesting to us is we're able to deliver better results. And when you own assets, so let's say you buy a multifamily building for $20 million, you put $10 million down, you get a mortgage. 5 years from now, you look at the net or operating income, and it turns out instead of it's being worth 20 million what you bought it for, it's worth 30 million. I can go and get another $5 million worth of debt, tax free.
So it's mean that
A cash out refi, staying at a reasonable amount of leverage. And what you do is it's a little step up, right? I operate the property, I increase the value of the property because the income goes up. I get more current income, and then I can step up to the next level of leverage in the US system, take it out tax-free. And then you can do that and trade. So families can get liquidity out of these assets, even though they're long-term illiquid assets. The reality is with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, HUD, USDA offering loans at all times in the market, that leverage strategy going from conservative, growing the value, maybe you went from, you had a $20 million mortgage and now it's worth 30. And so you have the ability to get more leverage and still stay conservative. And at the end of the day, what we're learning in today's cycle, those that did learn those lessons are dead. I got 80% leverage on a floating rate mortgage in 2020. The side of the road has carcasses of all that equity wiped out today. Because if you were, your mortgage, you paid the highest multiple, 20 plus, and you got max leverage, and then the rate of your mortgage doubled between 2020 and 2022. And 2022 and 2024 with the Fed increases in interest rates. And so a lot of, you might have had 10 million in that $20 million deal, but because you over leveraged it, maybe you put only 3 million in, that 3 million's gone.
Yeah.
And so what's happening now is there's a challenge in the US banking system that doesn't let it flush what needs to be flushed, right? So getting a little nerdy here, but if you look at the US Treasury and you look at the banking regulators, they said to banks, you can hold risk-based capital, you can hold it in stock, and I'll give you 60 cents on the dollar of credit for that. If it's in, NASDAQ or whatever, you can hold it in real estate, I'll give you 70 cents. If you hold it in US Treasuries, we'll give you 100 cents on the dollar. So therefore, that makes much more sense. They get more credit. They don't have to have as much risk-based capital if they hold them in US Treasuries. The Fed didn't tell the banks, don't go long, we're about to screw you. So in bond math, if you're familiar, right?
Yeah.
If interest rates are at 5% and now they're at 8%, instead of my bond being worth a $100,000 purchase ticket, it's now worth 70 cents, right? Because my interest rate 5% is less attractive. And so I have to sell this for a discount in order to get to the same yield as today, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? So within the context of that, there's been massive devaluation of bank balance sheets to the point where they cannot lend.
That's amazing.
Right? And without sales of assets and refinances, which happened normally, and refinances happen when interest rates start to get to the top and start to fall.
Yeah.
And what has happened since the Fed started raising interest rates? The short-term interest rate now has gone up. In last December, they started cutting. They cut 100 basis points. The last meeting yesterday, they did not cut. And the 10-year rate, which is what everyone borrows on for your single-family home or your apartment, has gone through the roof since the rate cuts. So it's now higher than it was before the rate cuts. And there's a big challenge, I think, relative to economic policy in the US. The Fed, frustratingly for business, just says, wait and see what the data says. That doesn't help me make an investment decision. It doesn't help my investors get off the sidelines and invest with me to take advantage of opportunities. And so we have a real, I think, crisis of confidence as it relates to major institutions. We talked to our friends at New York Life today. We're pencils down. MetLife pencils down. They're refinancing loans where they need to, but they're not out, deploying capital aggressively, and no one has for 2 years. So the opportunity, if you were to turn that around and look at it, would be that all the big boys have to come back into the market. They all have allocations. So the chief investment officer says to New York Life's investment management team, I need 22% in real estate at all times. And so when you're not putting money out for 2-3 years and projects are being paid off or being restructured, you're now down to 16 million or 14 million. And if you did that for 2 years, and in the case of New York Life, that's billions, right? Yeah. So they haven't met their target for 2 years. Their book is getting smaller. They're going to have to come back in 3 years, 4 years, whenever, it gets frothy again, and they'll overinvest then. And so the opportunity within the context of the U.S. real estate cycle, and when institutions have enough groupthink to come in a big way, that's not going to happen until this Fed cycle gets figured out. And in the meantime, there's going to be assets that have to be sold. And so the real opportunity is for private capital to get there before institutional capital, improve the assets, and sell to the guys at maybe it's the middle of the cycle, but we've never lost money by taking an earlier profit at the, so we underwrite an exit price for 5 years. If someone offers us that at 3 years, we seriously consider it. In most cases, we'll take it. And, that's the other lesson is take the bird in hand when you have it. And when you get greedy, you'll get slaughtered.
That was one of the best real estate overview I ever got in my life.
Oh, good.
So first, thank you.
Yes.
I'm sure the people that watching that get all the knowledge that they need to start to invest real estate or start to think about real estate. And that showed me how much knowledge and how much passion you have to that market of the real estate market. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, 30 years, probably 2 million frequent flyer miles and spinal fusion later. So it takes a little time.
Yeah.
And effort.
But a little bit of time. Yeah.
A little bit of time.
And take me for another question. It showed that the name of the podcast is The Way of the 1%.
Yeah.
It showed that you are the 1% of the real estate developer, in my opinion, in the USA and in the whole world. What is the core value that you think that real estate developer need to get, real estate entrepreneur need to get inside himself to keep pushing forward, to get the best deals and not give up?
Yeah, I think it's trust yourself until yourself tells you otherwise.
Okay.
So you have instincts. In many cases, they're right. And sometimes you can't rationalize them. But, if it is a lot, as it relates to the secret sauce, I think for us, we have been Boy Scouts in terms of investors, the investor dollars, investor communication, accounting, risk management, all the things that can affect your ability to trust working with me. We have been if there's any question, we're on the black. We're not in the gray, and we're not pushing accounting laws to give, our side better benefits than others, et cetera, because we were raised by the institutions. And if you didn't do it right, the word was you were not an acceptable risk.
Yeah.
And so do it right. If you're managing other people's capital, which you're going to have to do in this business, you need to treat that as a solemn responsibility. That's number one. Because like a marriage, you're in for 7 to 10 years. And unlike a marriage, there's no out until the asset's sold, right?
Yeah.
So the second thing I think is reiterate the same project as many times as you can during it, because it's going to change. The initial business plan is never the same as the ultimate business plan. And the key to your success is to recognize when things change and change with it. It could be, I'll give you 2 examples. In one example, the market's really tight and suddenly our occupancy went way down. It's time to raise rents. and damn occupancy. Let's get as much rent increase as we can until the market tells us we can't. And having the ability, I give it a sailing reference, right? So when you're sailing upwind, you can only get so close to the wind. You're trying to go straight north, but you can't. You have to zigzag back and forth. And sometimes the wind will shift and you can get a little closer to north. And the sailors that figure that out do twice as well as the guys on the other side. And so making adjustments to the business plan along the way. In today's environment, the last year has been relatively rough in multifamily. A rough year in multifamily is flat to negative 1% revenue, unlike other businesses which have much bigger fluctuations. But within that context, you need to know when to play defense, right? So we call it shutting the back door. If you're starting to hear that things are going to get tougher, right? Like when we had COVID and stuff like that, it's so much harder to get a new person to pay the rent that's to come in and move there.
Yeah.
In uncertain economic times, do I want to spend the $2,500 or $5,000 it's going to take me to move? I have to go through all this credit and everything else, all this other bull. My kids in school, blah blah blah. So we focus on the current residents. How can we keep you? Give them gift cards, make them happy. Even if you have to give them a slight discount. The cost for you to turn that unit back to rent to someone else is going to cost me $2,500, and it's going to cost them money to move, which is a much riskier environment. And so you need to know when to, keep as many people as you can, and then you need to know when, sorry, Mrs. Jones, the rent has gone up, and we're going to have to find someone who will pay the higher rent. That's really what the balance is. And we have the benefit now of having technology. So the same pricing software that you have on Priceline or the airlines or hotels is the same one we use. And the inputs, it's really sophisticated. And I think that AI, when I think about what the implications are, I've been spending a lot of time in San Francisco with large families that invest a lot in tech. And so through osmosis, to try and tell my real estate story, I'm learning, what AI can do and practical examples. So we have these, Silicon Valley folks come in and, I say, can you just help me with AI as it relates to what are the practical implications for me? Multifamily, our business is arcane. We're not run, on a tech platform. Generally speaking, people still have to make a phone call and do a tour of a unit. And, that's all going to change. But the woman who I was talking to, who gets $10,000 an hour from ConocoPhillips to consult, brought AI to the table. They had 18 analysts analyzing leases. They get, I think, a capital allocation from the company of $100 billion a year to sign as many leases, the best leases that they can for future production. And that's their allocation. And so their job is over the course of 9 months to look at every lease in the world and run a return on cost analysis to determine what's the best deal.
Yeah.
9 months, 18 analysts that get it done traditionally for the last 50 years. After working with them through 2 quarters, she was able to get AI to get it down to 8 hours. And so when you look at that, the reality from our perspective, I think that revenue will change, and we'll get to that as it relates to supply and demand in our business. But the real opportunity is if I get paid an 18 times multiple on average for my income, and I can reduce my expense by 15 to 20% through AI, whether it's back office stuff, whether it's customer facing stuff, and then if I can use AI to take 1 or 2% in terms of change, whether you renew with me or whether you move, the implications are massive, right? Simple. So what I think of, when I think about AI, I don't think about, people leap to crazy concepts of society and guaranteed income and all this stuff. To me, it's how does your generation use that tool to enhance and extend? And so in speaking to a Saudi prince who is a big investor in AI, we spent 2 hours after dinner having him explain this to us. And his take was it's an extension of, like, pick the best expert in each area of your company, give them AI and let it extend their reach. They already know how to teach it. Our CFO would know, make sure in a QC before the investor reports out to check these 17 things that I do automatically. and you can train it to do that, then maybe you don't need an analyst. Maybe instead of having 3 analysts to underwrite all the deals that we look at thousands of deals a year. Maybe you have 1 analyst managing, a projection program, through AI. And
Yeah.
so, and in our business, we have very arcane systems. Sometimes they're taking the bills from the property, sending them in a FedEx to the central office. You can see where there's opportunity here. And so, just to give you an example, let's just say a normal apartment, I have $500,000 in expenses. And let's say I can save 20%, it's $100,000. And I will get paid 18 times that amount. So I get paid $1.8 million in sales proceeds or refinance proceeds if I want to take them. That is a big, meaningful, multiple, and it's financeable.
Yeah.
And, that's what excites me just about the low-hanging fruit. On the other side, I think there's real opportunity for loneliness in America is a problem, especially in big apartment complexes, right?
Yeah.
Do you know your neighbor? There's, believe it or not, I think that there's real opportunity for chatbot to lead to stickiness for people. I'm going to stay there. They communicate with, I feel like they get me.
Yeah.
Right? Versus move somewhere else. I might have isolation again. And, interaction, people need interaction, right?
Yeah.
And so little things. I mean, I'm not going to say that people are going to, have a robot for a wife, but at the same time, having a better feeling about the apartment you live in because, hey, I noticed, you're a little late on your rent. Can we help you? Do we have a program? Can we get them into a program? There's all kinds of different proactive ways if someone is late with the rent, where you might be able to hook them up with a local nonprofit to help them pay the rent and get out of, trouble. And so all of that stuff is really easy and proactive to connect. And that's been done by people in the past. And so there's opportunities, I think, both on the, positive customer facing side and especially on the back office side where, if you were to take a macro bet, you buy as much multifamily as you can because expenses are going to go down. And within that context, if you bought $1 trillion worth of real estate, it might be worth 1.2 trillion afterwards. And for doing nothing but implementing AI, which will already come into our business through the systems that already manage the apartments. So in our business, we have sophisticated accounting systems that interface with the sales system. So it's the same as the airlines and everyone else. And those are large companies. There's 4 of them. And they're the ones bringing innovation into that. So they help you price the units. They help you manage your expenses, so just so you can get to growth in income at the end of the year.
That's a lot of ideas of how to do something great right now in these days. And most of the stuff that you say, you don't need a lot of money to start.
No, I mean, look, if I'm just starting, right?
Yeah.
And I'm old. And so I'm not the early adopter, right? But I can tell you, I think about things a little differently if you haven't noticed, right? It's
Yeah.
not the traditional approach. And maybe I see value in a different way. And that's the value I bring to the table.
That's beautiful.
But what's nice with AI for me is, is using Claude or ChatGPT. I can take, the crazy off the wall thoughts I have, and it will help me mainstream so that it can be understood by everyone, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes my point of views are a little, off center, and it takes me a little while to get people to the point. But, giving people information in ways that is easier to assimilate for them helps me become a better communicator. And, it took a 2-page letter I had and turned it into a 1-page with, better headlines and, a better situation. I think any opportunity, and this sounds really silly, but if I were a young person right now, I would go look for the most inefficient things that, drive everyone crazy and apply AI to it as a service, and either sell it to the people selling the product or, find a way to get in the middle where you can provide value because there's so many inefficient processes and everything else. And it's kind of interesting. So this is a question which I don't know the answer to, but if you think of a lot of, in the US, you don't have to deal with corruption as you do in other places,
Yeah.
right? At least in terms of your day-to-day life. If you want to get your lights turned on, yeah, you got to pay a crazy fee to the power company, but you don't have to pay the guy who's coming to install it. And so you wonder, as it relates to kind of systems like that around the world, how much effect maybe AI can be as a check to corruption
Yeah.
as it relates to, folks. And with so many more things entering electronic systems that don't have the ability to, yeah, well, slip the $500 onto my dashboard and, I'll let you go, the Mexican policeman says.
Yeah.
So I think there's opportunities also to avoid a lot of the inefficiencies. And when I thought of efficiency, I also thought about corruption, which is a major problem in a lot of places. I think AI can have a huge impact for those trying to root out corruption as well.
Nice. No, I love the way you think. I think it's that's what makes you unique, and that's what make you great businessman, great entrepreneur, and this is why you did what you did. I think this is the beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. As you can tell, I'm 55 years old, but I'm really passionate about what we do. There's an opportunity for us here. Why am I here in Boulder? I went to school here. I'm on the board of the business school. I like working with, the graduate school kids in terms of helping them find placement or, helping them figure out what they're good at and
Yeah.
what they might, where that spot is. But at the end of the day, I'm really passionate about these communities here. So, there's special places, the mountain communities to me are very special places. And, having an ability to help a situation caused by technology is interesting. So what we're selling ourselves in the mountain is as a solution to the Airbnb problem.
Yeah.
And if you look at, I don't know in Israel, how pervasive is Airbnb in terms of major cities and locations and restrictions and all that?
It's specific in Tel Aviv, but you need to remember that Israel is like Colorado is 14 times bigger than Israel.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Israel is like Denver.
Got it. Yeah, and so what's interesting is, so like, let's take Steamboat as an example, right?
Okay.
Small mountain town. They had, what happened, these towns grew up in the 70s, 60s and 70s. So the guys came back from the war who were in the 10th Mountain Division, and a lot of them came from the East Coast and went to Harvard and all that stuff. Some came from the West Coast.
Yeah.
They ended up here in Colorado, and they didn't want to go back and to that, 1950s, corporate life. So they started ski areas. And it was, it's a wonderful story of America. If you don't have a chance, I would go to the Vail main parking lot in Vail, and they have a museum in there that talks about just every one of the mountains was one of the members of the 10th Mountain Division that fought in Italy, that trained in Leadville. They built, barracks for, 30,000 people in a year and a half that trained on winter fighting.
Yeah.
So they could, come over the Alps if they needed to or whatever. And so these towns are this really fascinating amalgamation. So I think of like Hunt for Red October, right? And what does the captain want at the end of Hunt for Red October when he defects with the submarine? He wants a ranch in Montana, right? Everyone wants a ranch in Montana. And so these ski areas are a combination of ranchers, hotel people, and ski people.
Okay.
And somehow it works. And it's an amazing, it's the real West. So they're real cowboys. They're real guys, doing their thing. They, you have just an amazing collection. That's what makes these places special. They're in these absolutely gorgeous alpine environments. And what's great about them is they're physically limited. There's giant mountains around them. In this state specifically, the federal government owns the majority of the land, so you can't build on it, which may change under Trump, and I think would be a good thing.
Let's see.
So, but they're constrained. And what happens when you have constraint of real estate? The values go through the roof. So over COVID, the Steamboat values went up 75%. From, you could buy a house, a crappy old condo for $1 million, now it's going to cost you 1.7.
Wow.
And so you had a huge amount of older condo. It used to be in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of condominiums that were built. Then the tort reform did not happen in the US. So if you were a construction defect liability attorney, You would wait until near the end of the construction defect period, and you would sue every condominium building and their insurance company. And so in the state of Colorado, that really affected the ability for people to build the cheapest way for people to have home ownership, which is condominium, and really favored single family homes. So they wouldn't get sued, and there's no, not the same liability for the builder. And so in the mountain towns, they build condos. And if you were a wealthy family, like the majority of the real estate, half or more of the real estate is owned by people that do not live there full time.
Yeah.
They're there for 2 weeks a year. They bought the 70s condo on the mountain. They buy the new one in 1980. They buy the new one in 1990. And by 2000, they have 4 condos that they rent out to local people, and they have the one that their family's in. And that was a virtuous cycle where the wealthy families supported the locals with older stock that they didn't want to live in anyway.
Yeah.
And they were able to get income, and everything was great. And then Airbnb came along, and all of that in the New York Times, there were articles written that said, if you're an Airbnb investor in one of these ski towns, you make a 40% annual return. Because at first, you could do it everywhere. You could do a remodel on the kitchen and bath, and you could, over Christmas, you could make more than you could make renting to another person all year. You might get $3,000 a night for something that might only be, $1,800 for a month during the regular season. And so all of that supply disappeared. And so in the case of the Vail Valley, which is, big place, 4,000 units disappeared overnight. And so now you have all the workers in town. Vail Resorts and Alterra, the 2 guys who own all the mountains in the U.S., 100 mountains between them. In each location, they have, on average, 55 beds. And they have maybe 3,000 employees. But those 55 beds don't go to the U.S. worker. Those go to the J-1 visa worker. So in the U.S., there's a program called the J-1 visa program, where if you're in hospitality, an island like Nantucket or the ski area where you need seasonal workers to come in for hospitality season, you can bring them in, but according to the visa, you have to provide them housing. So this perverse environment exists where there isn't any housing. The only people with housing are people who are not from this country, and the local workers have to go 20, 30, 40 miles out to a trailer park. And so what we've been able to figure out is we can partner with these towns, and these towns will give us a better deal than the cities will on the Front Range because they're desperate. They need private capital. They need someone to produce more housing. It's very simple. In some cases, 3,000, 4,000 units, but the average deal size is maybe 150 units.
Yeah.
So there's long runways in each one of these places. And, to get a little nerdy, the opportunity is really the price elasticity of demand, meaning if you look at the number of units available and the number of units of demand, it's 5 to 10 times what's available. Nice. And so it's a very simple investment thesis. If you can find a place where there isn't anything and you can find a way to build something, then you have a precious commodity. And if you go back to kind of the Warren Buffett theory of investing, you need to have a moat around your strategy. And our moat is that Texas and other big merchant developers are scared to death of these places. You can't get enough done. It's a pain in the ass. And so we make a market in complexity by virtue of providing a solution to the town. The town gives us twice as many units sometimes as we could normally build in Boulder on that site. And we can, house local workers and make money at the same time. So, that makes perfect sense for us.
That's nice. So the last question that I have to ask, what is the best advice that you ever got in your life?
Well, for me, it's learn when to shut up.
That's good.
And I mean that. So I will tell you a story, right? Sometimes you're good at undoing a win.
Okay.
So as you can tell, I try hard to communicate with people, maybe too hard. But let's say we get to a win, and I've had this situation. I was in front of a large investment committee. They said, yeah, we're good. I made one more comment, opened it up. They weren't good. It took me a while to get it done. And so sometimes, the one piece is learn, and listen more. I'm not a great listener, and that's one of the things I'm working on is deep listening. So repeating back to people when they're talking to you to make sure that you understand them, because then that creates a rapport.
Yeah.
As it relates to having a conversation with people. So what I'm hearing you say is, and if they nod their head, then you've got them, right?
That makes sense. Yeah.
And then, at the end of the day, I think is don't be afraid to take a risk. And, failure, at the end of the day, I failed a number of times. Everyone who has ever gotten to success has had to go through hard times, and you just have to keep on pushing through. And, that's it at the end of the day. Look yourself in the mirror and, get through what you need to get through. Don't put it off, because problems that are not dealt with fester, and it has a problem on your mental health, and it has a problem on your business. And they, if you can take care of issues that you need to take care of every day. And so I'll end with my favorite story. In the great financial crisis, we ended up buying a position, another mortgage company that had an investment arm invested in 13 apartment buildings in Brooklyn. They had a partner, local partner. The financial crisis happened. They had funded 5 out of their $30 million commitment, and they went bankrupt. And so we were able to buy their position for $1, right? We bought their equity stake in these apartments, and we had to fund the remaining dollars and work with our local partner. And we had the amazing opportunity to work with one of the most brilliant guys I've ever met, named Mendel Rapkin. And we bought the buildings with him. And it's important in New York to have local partners, because being able to operate in New York is very difficult as it relates to rent control and all kinds of regulatory stuff. But, his management technique was the best I've ever seen. So he had a laptop, a yellow sticky pad. Whatever he needed to get done, he had on yellow sticky pads, and he never left until all the yellow sticky pads were done. The opposite thing is, in his office, there was his laptop, the yellow stickies, a Torah, a baseball bat, and a bottle of Chivas Regal. And if, he lived within balance of all of those elements, it was, very simple. Management, business is really, really simple when you get down to it. If you're honest with yourself and you do your homework to know what has to get done, you have to get it done. And it's easy to procrastinate as your own, entrepreneur, and you have to hold yourself accountable. But, if you live by the principles of the baseball bat, the Torah, and the bottle of Chivas Regal, I think you'll be okay.
Brad Blash, I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.